Okay, are we ready? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome, welcome everyone to this exciting panel on how the building material industry contributes to the circular world of the future. My name is Gonzalo Muñoz, high-level champion for COP25, and I'm really pleased to be moderating this panel in the moment when we're seeing the excitement of what we used to call the hard-to-abate sector, now the possible-to-abate sector, moving ahead in the decarbonizing economy. We saw that through the launch of the Breakthrough Agenda back in COP26, of course, with the energy or the power sector being the leading on that, then of course the work of the road transport sector. We saw the excitement of the green hydrogen economy ramping up, the agriculture and food sector, and then all of a sudden it became the moment for cement. And afterwards with cement and steel, of course, was first steel, I would say, then cement, now building. So we can see the excitement also coming from government saying it's the moment where all of the building sector has to be part of this decarbonized economy. And in that case, we need the leader entities to help us set the pathway, set the way for others to follow. And I'm really honored to be here providing the questions for a distinguished panels, including, of course, our host, Cemex, that will be in a minute represented by Fernando Gonzalez, their CEO. So, Fernando, thank you for joining and thank you for setting the conditions for this panel. Please join me in the panel. Fernando Gonzalez served as the Chief Executive Officer of Cemex since 2014 and been working for more than 30 years in the company. So I think that you know what you're talking about. It's been really an honor to be working with Cemex in this trajectory as a leading company for the cement industry worldwide. Also, we will have with us Circularity EV with Marianne Kuhlman joining. Where is Marianne? Online, great. So we're using also technology. I'm so sorry, you saw that I arrived late, so I'm just like ramping up for a lot of... Thank you so much, Marianne, for joining. Where are you from? I mean, where are you speaking from?
I'm in Berlin.
In Berlin, perfect. So Marianne Kuhlman is the co-founder and lead of Circularity EV, a do tank for the transition towards a circular economy. Was founded in 2018. We can see that many things around circularity like accelerated in that year. So it's great to get your experience specifically in the cement industry. And she's connecting practitioners in business and society and works with them to implement circular solutions. So thank you for joining, Marianne, and thank you for teaching us how to be here without traveling about the CO2 emissions.
Thank you, Ravi.
And without the walking from one place to the other. Yours is still better. I'm really sorry that Bill McDonagh is not being able to join. Bill is my personal mentor. I've been doing the work for more than 20 years in circular economy, mostly following Bill's trajectory. For those of you that might not know him, be shame about not knowing him and read his books. He's called like the father of circular economy, created the logic of cradle to cradle with Michael Bloomberg as well, and now he's been very much engaged into not only the logic of circular carbon economy, but also a lot of his work is being done on the logic of trying to find replacements for the cement industry to be one that is providing zero carbon or zero emissions solutions. He's been through some health problems. He was here yesterday and had to take a plane back to the US. So really sorry, Bill, if this is going to get recorded. We love you, Bill. You are the father of this. We love you. Thank you. We really hope that you recover fast and well, and that we can have you with us very soon. And thank you for the work that you've done for many, many, many years. You're an inspiration, and you know that you're my mentor. Thanks so much. So also with us, we have Reni Kesar. Reni, here you are. Thank you. Please join. Reni is the Global VP of Sustainability and Regulatory Affairs at Johnson Controls. So she's been working for 20 years in sustainability, marketing, and operations, and now has the responsibility for ensuring Johnson Controls delivers a full set of ESG commitments and operationalizing sustainability within the organization across the value chain. Thank you so much for being with us. And also, no, that's it. Yeah, because the two, I got it. That's tricky. So should I be sitting here? Maybe I will go there. Ramon. But I don't have you here, Ramon. I'm so sorry. So, Ramon. Yeah. I'm sorry, Ramon. Please join us on stage. And being fully transparent, I don't have your bio here. If you can introduce yourself, it would be great.
Hi, my name is Ramon Arratia. We had the pleasure to take this opportunity to fill as much as we can Bill McDonough's shoes. I'm from Ball Corporation. We make aluminum cans.
Brilliant. Fantastic. So we have different sectors. I'm going to move to that seat so we can balance the panel somehow. No, you sit there. I will be here. I assume that maybe check that microphone is not going to create problems. So thank you so much. Thank you also for the flexibility. And I would like just to start the panel with this round of questions. So I will start with you, Fernando. So how this, as I said, a hard to abate sector that we have to recognize that they're not possible to abate sectors, help to solve the climate crisis? Please take it.
Yes, let me start by commenting precisely what you've been saying. You know, from hard to abate to possible to abate means in the last few years, the industry has learned that the transition towards carbon neutrality is feasible. So it's not that hard anymore. And it is what it is. It is hard when you don't know how to do it. Right. So I think the industry now, and for sure Cemex has a good idea on how to achieve that transition. We are committed to net zero by 2050. We subscribe to the 1.5 degree scenario. Last year, we were certified by SBTi on our targets to 2030, not only the 2050 pledge. And we are very pleased because in the last 3 years, we have managed to reduce CO2 per ton of cement by 12%, which is a figure that might not tell some of you almost nothing. But it's huge. I mean, the reduction in 3 years is what used to take us 15 years to achieve. So there is an acceleration or an exponential change in speed in this decarbonation. How to do it? There are several levers specific to our industry. In our industry, close to 60% of CO2 is generated by the chemical reaction of the process. So it's not mainly about energy or renewable energy. The other 40% it is about energy and renewable energy. But we do have roadmaps per cement plant on this a map on how to reduce up to 50% of CO2 generated in cement through what some people call the traditional or conventional levers, meaning even before carbon capture and use, which will be the definitive solution for our industry, we can go as far as reducing half of emissions with traditional levers, known technologies, known practices, processes, materials, all of them with business cases, meaning it is a transformation through which we are creating value. So that I can start with that part.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Fernando. So let me go now to Marianne. Marianne, with 2030 and 2050 decarbonization targets in place, how do circularity programs help the building materials industry achieve these goals? And if possible, can you reflect more into 2030 than 2050, like how those transition plans look like? So please take it from there.
So I think the first key step to achieving a net zero circular economy is to exactly do that, to set clear and ambitious targets. Because these targets, first of all, provide a North Star and a goal based on which you can develop strategies. And they also create the space, and they set the ambition level to then develop strategies. And that is very important, because we don't want to do circularity just for circularity's sake, but to achieve these climate goals. And then I think circular economy can provide a very good different strategies to realize to achieve these goals in the buildings industry. Right? It's all from reimagining how do we use materials in our economy, to think what is really needed, how can it best be deployed, and what functionality do we really need. But then also to think about what kind of materials can we replace, or components in the materials can we replace, or in general inputs in the process. I mean, Fernando already mentioned the production processes of the cement, right? And then also in the building and in the construction life, to think about how can we make sure that the buildings last for a long time? How can they be reused? How can components also be reused? And then in the end, of course, recycling plays an important role. The reuse of spare parts, and then also the recycling and the reuse of the materials that are already in the economy.
Thanks so much, Marianne. If Bill was here, he would have said buildings don't live. So it's not about the life cycle, but the use cycle. So I'm sorry, but being mentored by Bill McDonough, I couldn't avoid by saying that comment.
That's true. 2 weeks ago, I was on a panel with Michael Braungart here in Germany.
Exactly.
And he said the same.
Exactly. Great. So great that we can bring them even though they're not here. So if I may then, of course, Rani, if you can take the same question, how circularity programs help the building materials industry to achieve the 2030 or 2050 goals?
Sure. So, Renee Kizar, thanks for hosting us. I think this is a great session. We were talking earlier about how do you bring circularity into the built environment, right? Because buildings, I think we're hot on the scene of greenhouse gas emissions, and what are we going to do? So let's use the terms and the frameworks that I think we've done in packaging and bring it into the built environment. I'm going to challenge that buildings are not alive, because I would say, well, Johnson Controls, we're the company that brings the building to life, right? So we are all of the equipment, though, that's using a lot of energy, but we're the HVAC, the lighting, the fire security. And I was thinking, I'm like, we're kind of like the sister to Cemex. So you guys are building the structure, and then we're everything on the inside that's bringing it to life. So just as you were saying that, I'm like, that's interesting, because we explained it slightly different, but I understand the point. As far as the targets, I would say, so our customers are real estate, our customers are, really any organization that has a building. Those are our customers. And many of them, in particular in real estate, are looking for net zero buildings by 2030 or 2035, which can take your breath away to an extent, because that's embodied carbon on one side and then operating carbon with all the energy use. And that also means then all of our materials, not only does that operating carbon have to get to zero, but the embedded carbon, the embodied carbon also has to get to zero pretty quickly. So I would say that demand signals are there for us, and just, maybe two examples. The big one on materials for us is steel. So in new construction, embodied carbon is about 50% of all of the carbon. Operating carbon is the other 50%. So our steel of our products, of our HVAC units and our chillers and all of those, that also has to come down to zero pretty quickly. So we look at, I'll say just, alternative steel making technologies like EAF or electric arc furnace, which can bring down the carbon content about 75%. There's still quite a bit to go. Of course, we're looking at, all the way up the value chain on what are the different uses of energy to get each of those value chain pieces of steel manufacturing to zero. But we're also looking at alternative materials. So there's a lot of other technologies that, we just source it. We aren't always sure of what's possible when it comes to steel. And I was part of a roundtable yesterday, and it was amazing of how many actually steps there are before we actually buy it. So I would say a lot of it's learning and educating what's possible. A lot of times with like nanostructured materials, you can get stronger steel, much thinner. So I think then bringing in circularity, the whole idea around reduce, I think we have to think about the reduction of materials when it comes to buildings. It's not typically, how do you reduce the steel of your HVAC could be one, but how do you reduce the flooring? How do you reduce what you actually have and actually need within a building? Then you have the recycled content, and then I would say then it gets into keeping buildings in its highest utility for as long as possible. So how do you maintain them? How do you repair them? You have to take care. You don't plug in a building and then walk away. It's a process of continuing to take care. So that's what I think of when we talk about the building life cycle, the building use cycle. Is it's not just about building a really nice, fancy net zero building. We have a lot of infrastructure we need to retrofit.
Totally agree. Thanks so much, Renee. And let me go back to you, Ramon, with the first question in relation to the materials, right? We already spoke about cement. Renee had just mentioned that's much more than just the material. There's so much to be integrated. And there's some other materials like, for example, aluminum, that also needs to solve and help to solve the climate crisis. How do you see that happening?
Aluminum is another hard-to-abate material, but again, when you look closely, it's less hard than you think. So we, in our climate transition plan, 50% of the equation is going to be circularity. So we have, from now to, I'm talking to now to 2030, 85% recycled content. So we're looking into the full circle in terms of design with the alloys, policies, the recycling process to have maximum yields, and then going back to recycled content. So 85% recycled content, that's 50% of the decarbonization potential to 2030. 11% of that is that aluminum, when you recycle aluminum, you save 95% of the energy, but you still need to heat it at 700 degrees. So technologies like you guys, these our friends from Finland, and other technologies that can displace gas. 700 degrees is not too much like other sectors like steel, but also is not is not in the 200, 300s. And then another part will be, for example, on the alumina production, which is going to be at temperatures around the 280. So there will be solutions there. For primary aluminum, 60% of the equation is going to be power. So, and we see just decarbonizing electricity will get you 60% there. And we're seeing this region, for example, in the Emirates investing heavily in renewables. There is in this region big aluminum smelter. There's going to be, with batteries storage, that's going to be the solution. And then you have anodes as well. The anodes, they release carbon out of the 16 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of aluminum. One point something is going to be anodes, and that's the technologies that we need to scale that are now in commercial pilot.
Thanks so much, Ramon. If I may, I will ask you the following question about the collaboration opportunities that exist across the built environment value chain, and how we can leverage the expertise from outside the traditional value chain to enhance our actions.
So if I think from the aluminum sector and from specifically the packaging sector, first of all, is around align on the policy and the policy to collection. Collecting, materials for buildings in a way is easier. I mean, is longer period, but is in a way easier. But collecting products that go to the consumer that are consumed very, very frequently, and collecting that at 90%, 100% requires really good waste management systems. It requires deposit return systems. So the industry is now coming into that. Yesterday, the whole industry launched a global call for increasing recycling rates to 100% by 2050. We're today 71%. We need to go to 85, 90, hopefully by 2030, and then 100. So that about policy is absolutely critical. And of course, there are diverse views because that it relates to the collection costs of the different materials. And then it's going to be around demand signals. That's where we're also part of the FMC. And there are going to be some technologies like inert anodes that will never happen if we don't provide those demand signals that we're going to assume the green premium. So these are two examples of collaboration.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. So I will go with the same question to you, Marianne. How do you see the opportunities of collaboration amongst the value chain that are normally the less traditional?
Yeah. So building on what Ramon said, the first important step for collaboration is that we align across the value chain on a vision of how the circular value chain will look like. Because we have been very good in optimizing the linear value chain. That means that each stakeholder often focuses on the individual part of the value chain. And there are different pathways to how to achieve circularity. And if we do different things, then we don't get to an aligned goal. So it's really important that we align on a joint vision of how the circular value chain for my industry will look like. And then it needs collaboration between the different stakeholders along the value chain in order to also realize that change, meaning we need coalitions to do the research on what are the potential solutions. We need to develop the ideas together to what can work, and then actually also pilot these ideas and implement them. Because we are at a stage where there's a lot of innovation going on and a lot of technologies being developed. So it's important that we also create the opportunities to test these out and then to actually build and scale them up. And for that, we need the different perspectives and the different competencies that are located along the value chain. And hence, these collaborations are important, as well as collectively defining the rules and the alignment of towards one goal.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Let me go back to you, René. What are some of the policies and regulations that have been effective in supporting a circular world, and what needs to be done to further enhance circular principles across the built environment?
So when I think, first and foremost, it's all about the, demand reduction, energy demand reduction. So policy-wise, what has been the most useful and is starting to accelerate is building performance standards. So standards coming from policymakers around how much energy and how much carbon your building can consume. And it's given, multiple years to get there, but it's a volume per square foot. So it's been really changed the dynamic of discussions now that we're having with our customers, because they're trying to weigh what a tax would be if they should continue to emit the carbon or have the energy use, or what are your solutions long-term looking at that ROI. So it's really brought to the table, more than my HVAC is completely broken, I need a new unit, which is what typically can happen, to how do I get in front of these energy efficiency standards. But it's still slow, right? New York City is probably on the leading edge of this, and of course there's a lot of real estate there. But it's something where we're actually looking to adopt it globally in other large cities, of just showing what does this look like. You set a target. Essentially, if you want to be a net zero city, it's a mechanism you have to get companies thinking of, what is the carbon load your city wants to have, and then how do you, divvy it out by square foot. So it's been interesting, but that's probably one of the most effective pieces. What we're trying to also work through is, obviously we want people to get in front of the curve until the deadline hits, and a lot of times, depending upon the term limits or the term time that they have, it may not be a priority right now versus, kicking the can down the road. So still working on it, but BPS has been pretty effective.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, René. Fernando, same thing. What do you see are the right type of policies and regulations that can enhance this?
Well, to start with, I think we have a challenge. We all have a challenge. Moving forward into this transformation towards net zero, innovation, new practices, new ways to produce or to distribute or ready mix and cement they have been on top or beyond current norms and regulations. The challenge is that norms and regulations are always a little bit behind of whatever can be done or whatever can be new in your production processes. Let me put one example. Nowadays, we can produce ready mix and cement with much, much lower CO2 content. For instance, this replica of the modern museum is made out of a product that we brand as Vertua, with 60 or 70% less CO2 content when compared to the traditional Portland cement. But according to the current norms, particularly in the US, for instance, we cannot sell that product yet. So what is the challenge? The challenge is to shorten or to reduce this gap, which again, we do consider it sort of natural, on how norms and regulation, building codes and other, can be speed up. So they can be not only allowing the use of this type of new products, but promoting them, meaning really incentivizing the construction space in order to get and to try and to use these new products. So one of the main challenges for us is building codes, norms, and standards on the products that now we are able to offer in the market. There are some others, perhaps several. I want to mention just a couple that are relevant to our industry, and then we might comment because of circularity. There are two types of norms that do impact heavily in our industry in this transformation process. One is the norms around construction, demolition, and excavation waste. It happens, and speaking about synergies or collaboration among the different components of construction, it happens that we can use most of that material, if we have the proper norms and regulations and ways to rescue the value of that material, we can use most of that material again to produce cement and ready mix, without using more and more natural materials coming from earth. But we need the norms and regulations that make that possible and that allow for that, the value of that material to be reutilized again. So that's one set of norms that are extremely relevant for us. In most of the countries worldwide, there are no necessarily the type of norms that will allow us to do that. I think Europe is a good example, and we've seen several, but even in Europe it's kind of new. We've seen several examples on how this material, instead of taking it and build landfill somewhere, can be recovered and can be used to produce cement or ready mix again. So that's one type of norms. The other norms are related to something that is very common, which is waste, household, commercial, and some industrial waste. It happens that according to our traditional economy, we extract things, we produce, we use, and we landfill. Landfills, according to the last report I saw from the United Nations, nowadays, after recalculating the impact of the methane that is naturally produced in those landfills, is the third source of methane after oil and gas and agriculture. It happens that the cement industry can be a kind of a vacuum cleaner. We can use 100% of that material as fuel. And that material has, in average, half of biomass. So it's a very convenient proposition for cement to be able to recover the value of energy in that waste, avoiding methane emission in landfills, and with proper regulations, that can be a profitable business for the different companies. Let me provide one example on the type of difference that it can make. In the case of Europe, there has been waste directives for 30, 40 years already. They are very, very mature. And because of that, we can get treated waste. I call it the cocktail we need, the waste cocktail we need to use it as a fuel. And instead of paying for it, meaning fuels is our highest production cost, but under those regulations, instead of paying for that material, we are paid. So according to that practice, we have converted our highest production cost into an income stream. And on top of it, we are avoiding methane emissions in landfills. So this is, I think, a good example on how norm and regulations nowadays should follow faster, closing the gap between what we see we can do now that the industry is not hard to abate, is possible to abate, and whatever is feasible. And that's a challenge for all, for us, for regulators, for everybody.
So thanks so much, Fernando. I think that this is something that we have been discussing quite a lot at FISEM as well. What's the reason why that doesn't progress? Because it's like evident, right? It's like a win-win situation for the environment, for the government, for the society at large, for the cement industry. Why is it not working?
I think it has to do with how in different geographies what's the different mindset we have in different geographies. I think if we don't go completely circular, meaning adapting our economies to the idea of a circular economy, most probably we will not get to net zero. The thing is that there are countries and regions in which the idea of circularity is clear, is known, and society has already bought it. But that is not happening in most of the countries all over the world. So I think when there is a lack of a rule, let's put it that way, for instance, in the case of waste, it is just a reflection on society. If society starts demanding rulers for that type of issues to happen, rulers will have no option but to properly rule on it. Now, we as a company, Cement Ready Mix Association, other business associations, other NGOs, all of us can happen for this gap between innovation and rules to be smaller, because I'm sure it's happening in all industries and in all. Maybe it's typically from the technology, the information technology sector. But nowadays, very basic industries like cement or aluminum or steel, we are innovating and we are doing it very fast. And we need new and better rules to really take advantage of the new possibilities.
Thanks so much. So let me keep you on the loop. Like, if these regulations come into place and we have a world where the appropriate regulations and incentives exist, how do you envision the building industry by 2050?
Our industry. I think, the challenge for us a few years ago, we know that our products are important to society. I mean, they are essential for social development and for economic development. But we also knew that generating about 8% of CO2 was an issue that we couldn't be sustained through time. So what is it that I see by 2050? A completely net zero industry in ready-mix. And that's the current version. Let's see what happens in a few years more, because most probably we will get to a point in which neutrality will not be necessarily the end of it, but we can convert ready-mix into a carbon sink, an effective carbon sink. But that is going to take some additional time. We need to learn a little bit more, and we need to try.
Remember that you're talking about 2050.
2050.
2050 it should be, right?
It should be, and even before.
Okay,
but
when? Throw it. Come on, no one is recording, don't worry. No one
30,
is taking.
40,
no one is in Twitter or X, whatever.
No, I don't have a specific date, but what I'm saying is the current aim is neutrality. I think through time, what we can expect is for neutrality to move to a carbon sink. I don't know if you call it a positive or a negative.
Yeah. Climate positive.
Climate positive thing. And the other aspect in the industry that little by little is going to be clearer is the role that we are going to be playing in society on cleaning it. I understand that construction, demolition, and excavation material is between 40 to 50% of total waste we humans produce. And household waste and some commercial waste account from 20 to 30%. So those waste streams or residue streams count for 70 to 80% of total waste. We can use most of the construction demolition, and the industry can use perhaps 10 to 20% of household waste. So through time, you will see clearer and clearer that our industry is going to be playing this role on. It's like a vacuum cleaner, just cleaning as much as possible.
Thank you so much, Fernando. So, Rene, in this context, and due to all of that we're having discussed now, what are some of the most significant opportunities to enhance circularity across the built environment, and how do we build for really long-term value?
Yeah, if I can even just weigh in on the waste topic. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of forcing functions that are going to happen. So on waste, when there's no longer a place to put it, is a forcing function. And the other one is when the materials are not available, you need it, right? So I think it'll get churning as soon as, then that's when the consumer is going to care, is when you start to see the piles of, I always think of plastic waste, right? When we saw piles of plastic waste, like mentally we changed our mind about how to think about it. So I'm thinking with the building construction retrofits, if we see a bunch of cement and chillers and, aluminum well, you were in the packaging industry, that's what's also going to get society to kind of get on board with maybe this is important to use recycled content. So just as I was thinking about waste, And then also the regulatory reporting, people will be accountable. But business value, kind of going off of that into the business value, there's huge business value. If you even just look at the investment community, that's another forcing function where the investors want to know how you're running your business and that you're running it responsibly. And so there is this, next level of, I think all the way, throughout our organization, next level of people wanting to articulate how they're taking seriously ESG. As a business value, again, I was talking about how as we bring these buildings to life, we're consuming a lot of energy with all of our products. So we have the responsibility to make sure that those products are the most energy efficient, low GWP, the global warming potential refrigerants that are involved in it. We have the responsibility to also bring in the digital component, the connected component, the Johnson controls. Actually, we invented 140 years ago the electric thermostat. That's where we started. So interestingly, when we think about the business value, whether we called it sustainability or not, it was about controls. And how do you now use those controls to control the building and control your environments, control it in a way where you're using the most, I'll say the optimum use of energy. And with that, quite frankly, business value with existing buildings is cost savings. We have an ESCO business where our whole business is to go out and maintain the operations for our customers in order to save them money. Cost for energy, cost for water, just optimizing those two pieces. So now we just reframe it to decarbonization and sustainable buildings, but it's the same business model. So it's kind of been interesting as far as how we'll see for existing. For new builds, I think what we see with our real estate company or with our real estate customers, anytime we talk about bringing in any type of net zero product, they want it. We lease our own facilities. I'm also responsible for our own net zero target by 2040. Our facilities are 50% of our emissions. So I'm going out and trying to source renewable energy for a lot of our facilities that we lease. So I have to go to the leaser and say, what do you think about renewable? They're like, can you do our entire complex? So there is such a need in the real estate for green buildings. There's such a demand for that it's huge value. So we see it ourselves as our own customer. We see it with our customers. I was reading some of the words on the wall. I feel like there's the middle. There's people who actually do understand the decarbonization of buildings and the call to action. There's a whole bunch of folks in the middle that are questioning sustainability. So I tend to just want to skip over that, right? And so, it really is our responsibility to get us to net zero buildings. The buildings are also going to play a huge role in adaptation. So as climate change gets worse, where are you going to go? You go inside. So we actually have a whole business unit on indoor air quality. So anyway, as we go, it's a huge, so as a business, I don't want it to make it, only altruistic, but it actually is a business model that we can see working for the future.
No doubt about it. Thank you, Renee. Ramon, same question. How do you see the most significant opportunities to enhance circularity into the built environment?
I'm just going to draw parallelisms from the packaging industry, and we're saying good policy becoming really key in order to align. So what we're seeing, first of all, I'm going to talk about the EU because that's leading in this space in terms of waste. Like 90% recycling rate for certain the high value products like PET, aluminum cans, etc. by 2029, 2030. That is one that is sending a lot of signals so that member states they have the right EPR. Extended producer responsibility is really interesting because economic instruments is gonna be what gives the right signals to design the products in the right place. So if you put a packaging in the market that has that is more costly to collect and recycle, you're gonna pay for your full costs. And then you're going to start optimizing. And then the retailers, the CPGs, they're going to use the packaging that cost less, and that changes the whole equation. It's not just a modulation. We call it the eco-modulation. It's not sometimes like a 5-10%. It can change dramatically which packagings are going to win in the market. The other one around really interesting economic instruments is, for example, a deposit. Consumers will pay in Europe, and you have already in the Nordics, in other countries, a deposit. When you buy packaging, you're going to pay a deposit. If you recycle, you redeem that deposit back. So that is effectively an economic instrument supporting recycling. It's an economic instrument that some of that deposit, which is unredeemed, there would be other people in the informal economy that they will do the recycling. So it's a shift from people who wouldn't recycle to people who would recycle. So we're seeing those policies with both top-down targets, systemic thinking about how the whole packaging collection system works, and economic instruments at the heart of it.
Thank you so much, Ramon. Marian, if you can give us also your ideas on what you see are the most significant opportunities to enhance circularity across the built environment, and how do we really build for a long-term value?
I think it depends a little bit on also where you are. Like here in Central Europe, for example, many of the buildings that will be here in 2050 are already there, right? So it's a lot of discussion about how to optimize the buildings that we have, how we can repurpose them, how can we make sure that they are used for as long as possible, how can they repurpose it, and all of that, right? And then there's a lot of opportunity also in thinking about how we can work with the demolition, the take back, and the remodulation of the buildings, right? So in Germany, of course, there's a lot of discussion about the digital product passport, also for buildings, the building materials passport, to make sure that we know what materials are in the buildings that we have already and how they can be then used in the new buildings to make sure that we create a circular economy there. But also it's about reskilling our workforce and thinking about like what kind of skills do we need to actually use the materials back, like how do we demolish buildings to make sure that we can recoup the products, the parts, and the materials, and then how can we innovate to make sure that we can use these materials and to not send them to landfill, but to actually employ them again in the beginning of the value chain.
Thanks so much.
I do think, of course, in the connection, just like to connect to also what Fernando has been saying, I think there's Renee, like to bring together the different industries, right? To really link the construction and the building material industry with the waste industry and the waste streams, and also think about the electronics and the way how we run and maintain our buildings with technology to heat and cool them, and then to optimize these across the sectors to a joint industry goal, like a joint economic goal.
Well, thanks so much, Marianne. Thanks so much, Ramon, Renee, and Fernando. I think this has been a really productive and wise conversation about the topic with experts on different fields of the value chain. I would be myself here, I don't close by referring again to Bill McDonagh. Bill would have said the importance of design, the importance of designing buildings as trees, buildings that can provide clean air, clean water, food. He would be, of course, saying that. Of course, he would have been referred to what Marianne just said on the importance of having passports for the different materials. So once you have a building that you have to demolish, it's an asset. It's not a main problem for the company and for the environment. And he will also have been referred to the importance of designing buildings for its end of use. Therefore, we can then convert them into something new in the moment that we decide that for the first purpose was no longer needed, as we saw during COVID. So by that, I just wanted to, again, give this homage to our dear Bill McDonagh, hoping that he can recover soon and well. And thank you again for this distinguished panelists for the really productive conversation. Thanks so much.